Mehdi, have you ever been there?
Yes.
When?
A few years ago. You said you went to Gaza. How come you went to Gaza when the world's media is not allowed into Gaza?
Well, there's two reasons.
When they took you into Gaza, you're very bothered by Qatar. He didn't ask Benjamin Netanyahu, why did you work with Qatar to fund Hamas all those years? Why did you prop up Hamas? You said, clear all the Palestinians from that benighted strip. Ethnic cleansing is a war crime. Douglas, just apologize.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am a reaver and I was taught how to pray Salah.
That means every single time I pray,
the person who taught me gets the reward.
5 times a day, from Fajr to Isha.
If you want to support someone like me in learning Salah,
then sponsor 10 people for just £100.
Remember the Prophet, peace be upon him, said,
Charity does not decrease wealth. Click the button and donate now.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. I was sent footage of a recent live debate between Mehdi Hasan and Douglas Murray. It was interesting to see Mehdi, an independent journalist, take on Murray, who's an actual hired Israeli government employee, as leaked emails have recently revealed. What also stood out to me was how Murray brought up the Sudan crisis, as if the Israeli side were concerned about the people over there, which just raises my suspicions about their involvement in orchestrating the Sudan situation, similar to how they did Gaza. Let's watch the first clip.
What happened on the 7th of October, it was the equivalent to about 6,000 Canadians being massacred. You know, the interesting thing about anti-Semitism is it's a shape-shifting virus. It moves across the centuries. Now, the Jews are hated not for their religion or their race, but for having a state. Today, the only really acceptable form of anti-Semitism, aside from the sewers of the far right, the only real tolerated form of anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism.
In 1917, over 100 years ago, Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, a card-carrying anti-Semite, a man who had denounced the evils of Jewish immigration into the UK, a man who referred to Jews as an alien and hostile people, he issued his Balfour Declaration, which promised a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It was the first time a major world power had come out in favor of Zionism, which at the time was a pretty new and pretty controversial movement, calling not just for a Jewish homeland, but for the building of a Jewish majority state in Palestine. And yet the only Jewish member of the British cabinet at that time, a man named Edwin Samuel Montagu, adamantly opposed both Zionism, which he called a mischievous political creed, and the Balfour Declaration, which he referred to as anti-Semitic and a rallying ground for anti-Semites in every country in the world. The only Jewish member of the British cabinet, that is what he said. And yet tonight here in Toronto, over 100 years later, we are being asked to vote for a motion that would damn Montagu as the anti-Semite while praising Balfour as the champion of Jews and Judaism. That's ridiculous. And by the way, on the subject of Gaza, given Douglas gave us some math about the death toll on October the 7th, horrific death toll, which we all condemn, I would remind you also that the death toll inflicted on Gaza, the deaths and injuries in Gaza are the equivalent, if we're going to do the ratios, of 2 million Canadians. 2 million Canadians. But that's not what the debate is about. It's not even about Zionism itself. It's about the legitimacy of anti-Zionism, whether you can be anti-Zionist, opposed to Zionism, which, remember, is a political ideology, a nationalist movement, not a religion, not a race, not a protected class, whether you can be anti-Zionist without being smeared, tarred, demonized as an anti-Semite. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is hating Jews, the people, and Judaism, the religion. Anti-Zionism is opposing Israel, the state, and Zionism, the ethno-nationalist ideology that underpins that state. Zionism is not Judaism. Right? It's a very modern, secular, political ideology movement that was founded less than 150 years ago by an atheist named Theodore Herzl, who said, and I quote, "The anti-Semites will be our most dependable friends, the anti-Semitic countries our allies." His words, not mine. To ask Palestinians not to be anti-Zionist is to ask Palestinians not to be. You're saying the Satmar, the world's biggest Hasidic Jewish sect, which says it is fighting God's war against Zionism, is anti-Semitic. You're saying Jewish college students on campus, maybe some of them are your kids, members of If Not Now and Jewish Voices for Peace, they're anti-Semites. You're saying some of the most respected Jewish voices in the world, like Avraham Berg, the former Speaker of the Parliament, Miriam Margolis, the actress from Harry Bloody Potter, they're all anti-Semites. That is what you are saying.
Douglas Murray just comes across as fake, pretentious and unconvincing. His weak attempt to conflate October 7th as being worse than a full-blown 2-year-long genocide in Gaza was swatted aside by Mehdi Hasan by simply comparing death toll numbers. Douglas debunked his own argument as soon as he started speaking, when he said the Jewish community are not hated for their race or religion, but due to having a state. That's what the pro-Palestine side has always said. There is no racism or religious discrimination involved in opposing Israel's Zionist supremacist ideology, which was the point Mehdi was making in the first place. Murray also stupidly made reference to the far right as if they are against Zionism, which again is false, because not only is the current Israeli government far right, they hire far right propagandists across the world to push their agenda, many of whom Douglas himself endorses frequently. Mehdi Hasan gave examples of actual anti-Semites and atheists, such as Theodor Herzl, the creator of the toxic ideology of Zionism, and Arthur Balfour, who is responsible for allocating Palestinian land to Jewish Europeans to form the country now known as Israel. Like Mehdi said, the irony is that anti-Semites and Jewish extremists of that time are being hailed in this day and age as representatives of Jewishness, rather than the moderates and actual religious people of that time that oppose Zionism and Israel. As Mehdi stated, opposing Zionism has nothing to do with prejudice against Judaism, which is evident from the numerous groups of modern Jews who are anti-Zionist. And for the Palestinians, it literally is a matter of survival. Let's watch the next clip.
If you didn't throng the streets of this city or any other for the actual genocide going on in Sudan, if you didn't spend weekend after weekend doing that, but you did come out for the post-October the 7th protests, you're an anti-Semite.
By the way, this whole argument, why didn't you protest Sudan? Why didn't you protest Syria? Last time I checked, the United States Congress does not fund Bashar al-Assad or the RSF militias in Sudan. So stop with this lazy whataboutism that gives you...
You fund your friends in Tehran.
The US Congress funds Tehran. US funds Iran. America is funding Iran like it funds Israel. This is absurd. But if you're going to focus on October 7th, then also focus on what happened since October the 7th, what happened to Palestinians. I'm sorry to say it's absolutely shameful and telling about what's going on. A friend of mine, American doctor, goes to Gaza. Many doctors have gone to Gaza. You've seen them on the news. They're all liars, all Hamas apparently. A friend of mine went to Gaza. He's been to Sudan. He doesn't just use it for whataboutism like Douglas. He's been to Sudan. He's been to Afghanistan. He's worked there. He came back from Gaza and said, I've never seen atrocities like I've seen here. Because he saw children with burn wounds like he's never seen. He saw children with gunshot wounds to the head. To the head, but that's Hamas's fault. Everything is Hamas's fault. Douglas stepped up and accused every Jewish protester against Israel of being an anti-Semite, which I find offensive and ridiculous. Thousands upon thousands of Jews, they took their right to go out on the streets in Toronto, in DC, in New York, in London, in Paris, all over the world, in Tel Aviv, to protest against what's happening in Gaza. And Douglas, one of the world's most proud atheists, not Jewish as far as I know, just damned them all as anti-Semites. Wow, that speaks volumes. And my friend Peter Beinart, who is Jewish, just so Douglas will call him an anti-Semite later, as he pointed out, the Basques, the Catalans, the Kurds, the Scots, they don't have states. And if you oppose them having states, you're not an anti-Kurd bigot, you're not an anti-Scot bigot, you're not an anti-Catalan bigot. So this is ridiculous, this argument that we are being expected to believe that if you don't support Israel as it is currently constituted, with Jewish supremacy, that makes you an anti-Semite. It's an abuse of anti-Semitism. In order to defend a country Douglas seems to think is fine, has killed tens of thousands of innocent people in recent months.
What I found suspicious about this segment was Douglas Murray is using the same Sudan genocide talking points when this debate took place in mid-2024 to favour Israel, as are currently being used in late 2025. Is that not a dead giveaway that Israeli fingerprints are all over the Sudan crisis? With sellout Arab Zionist Emirati leaders allowing the UAE to be used as an Israeli proxy to commit genocide against what are supposed to be their fellow Sudanese Muslim brothers and sisters while stealing their natural resources in the process. I stand with our people in Sudan, and if you do too, boycott the UAE the same way we boycott Israel. Mehdi even made the claim that a friend of his who is a doctor has been to both Gaza and Sudan and claimed that atrocities in Gaza are much worse. I'm not so sure about that, as I have heard that both situations are on par in severity in different ways. Mehdi Hasan left Douglas Murray dumbfounded when he said the US Congress don't fund genocide in Sudan like they do in Gaza, which resulted in Murray stuttering an outright lie that the US fund Iran. Like Mehdi, I couldn't help but chuckle at this utter stupidity. As Mehdi said, Murray deliberately minimising what has happened to Palestinians since October 7, 2023 is a complete disgrace. And as Mehdi put it, when Douglas Murray demonises pro-Palestinian protesters, he is by default demonising Jewish people that are pro-Palestine, which could be seen as Murray walking the tightrope of anti-Semitism himself. Let's roll the next clip.
Mehdi, have you ever been there?
Yes.
When?
A few years ago, not recently. I don't get awards from the president of Israel like you do, so I don't get to do softball interviews with Netanyahu. I didn't get invited into Gaza. Douglas, you said in your speech.
Let me finish my point.
But you went to Gaza, right? You said you went to Gaza. How come you went to Gaza when the world's media is not allowed into Gaza?
There's two reasons.
But they took you into Gaza.
Well, first of all, I'll explain. You see, if I was on stage tonight, busily flying around the world to busily defame a democracy, I would spend a bit of time there, maybe.
Douglas is the great journalist in Israel. I love this. Cosplaying as a journalist, going into Gaza with the IDF. Douglas interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu in January. Douglas did not, you're very bothered by Qatar and funding Hamas.
They're your bosses.
I've interviewed Qatari officials. You can go on YouTube and watch my interviews with Qatari officials. And then you can watch Douglas interview Benjamin Netanyahu, where he asked him pearls like, is there another chapter left in the Netanyahu biography? That was the strong question for that. He didn't ask Benjamin Netanyahu, why did you work with Qatar to fund Hamas all those years? Why did you prop up Hamas all those years? Why, according to today's Israeli media, did you have reports that there was going to be an attack on your citizens and completely allow that to happen? Douglas didn't ask any of those questions. Instead, he'd like to spray around Hamas at the Muslim on the stage. Douglas referred to Hamza Yusuf, the First Minister of Scotland recently, as the First Minister of Gaza. Muslim guy. You said, quote, he has infiltrated our system. Given we're at a debate about anti-Semitism, I find it ironic that you are throwing out some of the most bigoted dual loyalty tropes known to man, referring to a born British Muslim politician. Douglas says the war would end if Hamas gave back the hostages. Complete lie. The Israelis have said, even if the hostages come back, we carry on the war. In fact, I interviewed Avraham Munter's nephew. Avraham Munter is a 17-year-old Israeli hostage. His nephew says that every time he goes on the streets, Ben Gvir's police beat him. They beat him and arrest him. They're arresting hostages' family members. And they're coming on TV and saying, why are we being used as props by people who support the war? He doesn't support the war. He wants a deal. Israeli family members are going on the streets and being tear-gassed and water cannon or whatever, beaten by the police because they want a deal and they want an end to the war that Douglas so proudly supports. They keep telling us about the horrors of October the 7th. I agree. This side shares the revulsion against the horrors of October the 7th, but we also share revulsion against the horrors that came since October the 7th. We don't support those horrors. Douglas, the week after October the 7th, came out in The Spectator and advocated for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, which is a crime against humanity under the Rome Statute. You said now is a good time to do it.
It didn't just go over my head that Douglas Murray did his whole have you ever been there bit that he's now ridiculed for after he tried to pull rank on Dave Smith during a debate on Joe Rogan and failed miserably. And we've not seen him use that slimy tactic since. This debate with Mehdi was a little bit before Douglas's viral public humiliation. And unlike Dave Smith, Mehdi Hasan said he has been there. Like Mehdi said, he wasn't given a propaganda tour by the most immoral army in the world, the IDF, whilst cosplaying as a journalist when actual real-life journalists across the world are banned from entering Gaza, as it would completely incriminate Israel. Mehdi also brilliantly called out Murray's softball PR interview with Israeli PM Netanyahu, as well as Douglas parroting back Israeli Hasbara nonsense about Hamas and Qatar, when Mehdi told Murray that he forgot to ask Netanyahu why he funded Hamas through Qatar and staged October 7th himself. It was so satisfying to see Murray squirm in silence in response. Well done to Mehdi for also exposing Murray for the bigot that he is, when he revealed how Murray used Islamophobic slurs against a British Muslim politician for simply speaking up for Gaza. Mehdi was also spot on when he said Douglas Murray lied numerous times about how a hostage return would put an end to the Israeli regime's aggression, when Israeli politicians have said and done the opposite, even going as far as having the family members of the Israeli hostages assaulted because they dared to protest against the Israeli government for delaying their release. And now that all the hostages have been returned, Israel is still bombing Gaza as they please during a supposed ceasefire. I was unaware that Douglas Murray was so brazenly anti-Palestine that he outright called for ethnic cleansing to take place in Gaza, as Mehdi revealed. It doesn't get much more disgusting than that. Let's watch the last clip.
If anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitic, why do all these kids who've never protested about anything else before in the world stage want the eradication of the world's only Jewish state? These students are desperate for a cause. They're desperate for meaning in their lives. Everything in the world is oppressor, oppressed, occupier, occupied, colonizer, colonized. And this incredibly simplistic idea, they then implant or try to implant over the world's most complex region. And what they don't realize is that if they got what they wanted, they'd have finished the work of Adolf Hitler.
I'm glad we brought up college campuses, because again, if this ridiculous sweeping motion, Douglas says complexity, we are the side of complexity, we're not the ones saying anti-Zionism across the board is anti-Semitism, you have to deal with the fact that college protests are disproportionate. There are a disproportionate number of Jews in these protests. While Douglas was getting awards from the President of Israel, we were actually reporting, my news organization Zateo, from those campuses with Jewish students protesting war crimes in Gaza, which I know the other side thinks there are no war crimes, everything we just imagine. They're all brainwashed, they're all idiots, they're all self-haters. Some of the top academics at Columbia University who are Jewish have come out to defend the protests. Annalise Orlek is a 65-year-old former chair of Jewish studies at Dartmouth. She was beaten on camera by police while she was protesting against the war in Gaza. Apparently Douglas, an atheist, says that she's an anti-Semite. That's the debate, that's what we've got to tonight, where the former chair of Jewish studies at Dartmouth is an anti-Semite, while Douglas is the champion of the Jewish people. I find it bizarre, and I'm glad we've brought up college protests, because it's the #1 evidence right now in our discourse.
Congratulations, Mehdi. You know the drill. You can always find a Jew on your side who'll support what you do.
The advisor to the ICC chief prosecutor is a man named Theodore Meron, 94 years old, Holocaust survivor, former advisor to the Israeli foreign minister. He advised the ICC to ask for arrest warrants, but according to Douglas, he's an anti-Semite too. The International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the UNHCR, UNICEF, Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Oxfam, Christian Aid. It is amazing that every human rights group in the world, including Israeli human rights groups like B'Tselem, Gisha, Yeshdin, are all documenting this stuff, but you guys think it's all imaginary. So again, it tells you about what Zionism is. This is not about some abstract ideology of, people trying to settle the land. Zionism today is what the Palestinians are enduring on a daily, nightly basis in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in Israel itself. And the erasure of that tells you everything about why we need to be able to talk about what Zionism does to the Palestinians without being smeared as anti-Semites.
Most Israelis learned what the teaching of hate to Palestinian children means, and now, after October the 7th, they've learned it 1,000-fold.
You can't even get Israeli propaganda straight. You're the guy who denied earlier that what you said in the Spectator, let's just be the clear content, we're talking about October 7th, October 7th. 5 days after October 7th, you said, maybe they will finally put an end to this insoluble nightmare, raise Hamas to the ground, or clear all the Palestinians from that benighted strip. It could be a good time to do it, but you tell this audience, we can live in peace side by side. That's a war crime. Ethnic cleansing is a war crime. Clearing people.
No, I said maybe for a reason.
It could be a good time to do it.
For goodness sake.
Douglas, just apologize and move on. Seriously.
Douglas Murray really is a terrible propagandist. Pretending to be a know-it-all just comes across as off-putting, especially when you're defending genocide by demonising innocent Palestinian children, by saying they deserve to be killed because they're brainwashed like Douglas did in this segment. Murray's awful attempt to undermine and smear college students across the West, many of whom are Jewish, as anti-Semitic for opposing Israel was yet another embarrassing fail on his part. I mean, he even went as far as to compare them to the Austrian painter from World War II. As Mehdi said, Douglas Murray's claims are simply idiotic. As not only is his warped method of judgment wrong when applied to students on college campuses, it also fails when applied to Jewish academics and Jewish members of the ICC who conclude Israel committed war crimes, as well as the ICJ and countless other human rights organisations, including Israeli ones, that contradict Douglas Murray's propaganda points. As Mehdi stated, Murray again as an atheist judging pro-Palestinian Jews sounds much more anti-Semitic than the Jews he's falsely accusing of anti-Semitism. Mehdi was correct to define Zionism as the terrorism we see being acted out by the Israeli regime in Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, as well as against Israel's Muslim and Christian population. This was yet another fantastic debate performance by Mehdi Hasan as he absolutely annihilated Douglas Murray. And like Mehdi said, there's no coming back from being a cheap low-life ethnic cleansing apologist. And that applies not only to Douglas Murray but to every pro-Israel propagandist who sold their soul to Satan. Thank you for watching. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.